And Maggie and Lucas, can you back up probably like 2 steps? Lucas.
Okay, my mic's open, and I hope my level's good because with that little slide mishap, we didn't have a whole lot of time to practice.
Okay, it sounds good to me. What do you think, Angie? Okay, so what I'll do, I'll say standby and then count Abacus in and he'll introduce you guys, okay? Okay, so stand by, everyone. And Abacus, you are live in 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a very fun keynote with Peggy Sheehy and Lucas Gillespie here talking about WoW in schools. Both Peggy and Lucas have been in Second Life for a really long time. Peggy's been in since 2005, and Lucas has been in since 2006. However, most of you are probably familiar with them in their role in World of Warcraft. And so tonight they're going to talk about what they've been up to. And I just have to say it's been a personal pleasure to tank for both of them. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Peggy. Thank you.
There we go. Okay, well, this is a little awkward because I'm not hearing anyone, but I've been told that you can hear me. So welcome and thank you. And allow me to begin by introducing myself and my co-presenter as we talk about classroom cataclysm, or what happens to school when learners become heroes. Oh my goodness, our slides are reversed. Is there something we can do about that, Treat? For some reason, my slides are in reverse order, so let me just see if I can talk to technical people and get that sorted out. Sorry about the delay.
In the meantime, I'll introduce myself. My name is Lucas Gillespie. I'm the Instructional Technology Coordinator for Pender County Schools. We're a small rural district in southeastern North Carolina. And it has been a total honor to work with Peggy on this project, and we have seen some amazing things. And we hope that if you're around up early in the morning, that you guys might consider coming in for our virtual tour that my students and Peggy's students will be leading in World of Warcraft tomorrow morning. And that, I believe, is at 6 o'clock Second Lifetime. Is that correct? I believe that's right. Yeah, that's 6 a.m. Second Lifetime. Yeah, thank you, Abacus. 6 o'clock Second Lifetime, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And the rest of you guys, I'm not very good at doing those conversions, so you guys will have to look up whatever time zone that you're in.
Okay, true to form. Technical difficulties, but teachers roll with that kind of stuff. That's just the way we roll. So real quick, my name's Peggy Sheehy, and I serve as the instructional technology facilitator at a public middle school in Suffern, New York, in Ramapo Central School District. And there's my Twitter feed, so please do connect with me.
I introduced myself already, but my Twitter handle is PCS Tech. So if you would like to connect with me, I would greatly appreciate it, and I would love to share and learn about what you're doing in virtual worlds. We should also mention a colleague of mine, Craig Lawson, who is he's one of my partners in crime here in Pender County. He is a eighth grade language arts teacher at a middle school, and he is the classroom teacher or the teacher of record in the WoW in School program. So he and I work very closely together here in Pender County.
So just a short version of the history of this project. Much of my work has been in virtual worlds like Second Life, and one of the constant challenges I had to face was explaining to people that Second Life wasn't a game. That although it shared many of the qualities of a game, it was massively multiplayer, it was online, it was visually rich and interactive and persistent. There is no game engine per se in Second Life. It's all user-created content, and basically the user creates the experience. But it was this connection to games that started me attending gaming conferences and reading books about gaming, which led to scores and scores of conversations about games and ultimately to my own gameplay. Until the past few years, I cringed at the inclusion of game worlds in any discussion about virtual world education. And I think it's important for you to know the backstory to this path. When we were pioneering virtual worlds for education, we not only had to counter the X-rated hype that was then associated with worlds like Second Life, but also the negative stereotypes about video games, because the uninformed listener lumped the two together. Any of us who have spent any time trying to explain to people what a virtual world is have usually had to explain the difference between a virtual world and a game. In fact, when I used to be a docent on Isti Island here, it was the people who arrived with gaming experience that were the most perplexed. Since there was no game engine guiding their experience, they were truly at a loss as to how to begin living their second life. And for years, I had to make this distinction to audiences, and the more I did, the more I wondered what the similarities between games and virtual worlds actually were. And that brought us then to our guild being born. Cognitive Dissonance is on the Sisters of Elune server, and we are an alliance guild. And it was charted in December 2007 as a group of educators who just wanted to explore massively multiplayer online role-playing games and their relationship to education. It has grown since then to be a guild of colleagues and friends, 350 strong, international, exploring the platform and experiencing both the implications and the applications to teaching and learning. We're having fun. Now, if you remember from your mandatory ed psych course, some of you who are teachers out there, cognitive dissonance is also that uncomfortable feeling caused by holding two contradictory ideas simultaneously. And it became our name in honor of the conflict in thought between traditional learning structures and the ubiquitous use of technology in education. So we began learning to game together. We began learning about gaming together, and in general, learning from one another. But most importantly, remembering the concept of play being an integral part of learning, we basically have established an arena to recall it for ourselves and include it within our teaching. So a video game guild has become for us an extension of our personal learning networks. We are educators who play. So I guess a likely place to start tonight would be to begin by simply talking about games. I mean, what exactly is a game? And this is a much more challenging question than it might appear. And it's also one that's been addressed by many leading game researchers. There are more genres and platforms for games today than ever before in history. I mean, there's single player, multiplayer, massively multiplayer. There's games you can play on personal computers, on consoles, on handheld devices, on your phone. And then there's still the games that we play on fields or on courts or with cards or with boards. Whether we choose 10-minute casual games or 8-hour action games or role-playing games that go on for 24 hours, 365 days a year, or whether they're story-based games or with or without scores, or games that mostly engage our brains or mostly engage our bodies, or any of the infinite combinations of the two, within all these varieties, there's one thing that they all have in common, and that is that when we are playing a game, we just know it. We know it because there is something essentially unique about the experience. And when you strip away the genre differences and the technological aspects, all games share 4 defining traits. And I want you to now think in your head if you know what those 4 things would be. And think of a game, any game at all. It doesn't need to be a video game. It doesn't need to be a digitized game. Any game at all that you play or you've ever played. And keep these next 4 slides in mind as we do that. So first of all, a game has goals. And what is the purpose of a goal in a game? It's a specific outcome that you work to achieve. And it focuses your attention and continually orients your participation throughout the game. The goal basically provides you with a sense of purpose. And next, games have rules. And rules place limitations on how players can achieve the goal. They either remove or limit the obvious ways of getting to the goal, and the rules push players to explore the boundaries and the possibilities. They unleash creativity and they foster strategic thinking. Next, games have feedback. And the feedback system basically just tells players how close they are to achieving your goal. And feedback can be the points or the levels or score or a progress bar or a leaderboard. Or in its most basic form, the feedback system can be as simple as the player's knowledge of the objective outcome. So in their mind, the player says the game is over when X happens. This real-time feedback serves as a promise to the player that the goal is definitely achievable, and it provides motivation to keep playing. And finally, games have voluntary participation. You know, you have to step up to the plate and say, yes, I want to play the game. It requires that everybody who is playing knowingly and willingly accepts the goals, the rules, and the feedback. And that knowingness establishes common ground for multiple people to play together, and the freedom to enter or leave a game at will ensures that intentionally challenging work is experienced as safe and pleasurable activity. Now, the curious thing then is that knowing this, so often it's the education camp that can't seem to figure out why these things are important. It's the dichotomy that educators can't seem to harness this power to support their instructional goals. And when Lucas and I speak to teachers, they don't lack the willingness. They get that this is important. But more often it's about the modeling. Where's the book? Where are the lesson plan ideas? Show me some examples. Show me what it looks like. And that consistent thread again in all of our struggles to figure out what shifts need to take place to do our job well for this generation of learners is we are looking for a new learning disposition. And I'd put forth that we're looking for a questing disposition, a good old Don Quixote questing disposition. When we see students playing video games, so intensely engaged in hard work that they have volunteered for, we need to think about how those elements of engagement and focus might transfer to practice in our schools. So I'm going to let Lucas talk for a little bit here on the next 6 or so slides.
Yeah, thank you, Peggy. And one thing I would like to notice too, and I've mentioned this in our recent presentations, is that this divide between work and play is also pushing down into our lower level learners. And what I'm seeing is that is even becoming apparent in school, that even students have created this artificial wall between play and learning, because they believe that play and fun are something that happen outside of school and not something that can happen inside of school. And that's tragic, I think, and it's something that we've absolutely got to battle. So first off, I'd like for you to meet your learners. If you haven't met these, or if you don't have some kids around, you go find some, go out in the schools and look. And you look at kids in a typical classroom. Often they're disengaged, or sitting in rows, and they're locked into a very industrial age model of instruction. But when we see kids playing video games, you can measure the level of engagement of any learner just by looking at their face. Look at their facial expressions. What do you see going on there? Kids playing video games have this intense focus, and it's amazing to see that. And game designers know this. Jim G is somebody you should definitely read. Check out his book, What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Learning and Literacy. Jim G is at Arizona State University, and he is doing all kinds of great work, and he's laying the academic groundwork for this. So what we want to do for a moment is take some time and compare our different learning environments. Let's look at a game like World of Warcraft and compare it as a place where learning takes place to what happens in a typical classroom. So when it comes to resources for learning, where do I go and get information that I need to construct my knowledge about the kinds of things that I need to learn? In World of Warcraft, a lot of that resource is built into the game itself. So if I want to know where I'm at, I look at the map. If I want to know what my current quest is, I can pull up my quest log. I can have my spell book, tons of information at my fingertips. I also have outside resources, fan-based sites, blogs, Facebook, Twitter feeds. I have my friends who are also players with me, guild resources and things like that, and even custom apps. In addition to that, you have WoW Wiki, the second largest wiki in the world by number of articles compared to Wikipedia. So there's all of this information out there on the web, tons of resources, and it's there when I need it, just in time. But when we talk about the classroom, those resources are limited to usually the teacher and any resources that I may have in the classroom. Now, if I'm fortunate enough to be in a connected classroom, then I have additional resources if they're not blocked by the school district. So there's two different places here where we have two different paradigms when it comes to resources that we have available to us for learning. Now, another thing that's very different is the amount of time that we have for learning. So look at, in World of Warcraft, I have as much time as I need as a player. I can progress at my own pace. Therefore, since time is a variable, achievement's always going to be a constant. I can always win because I have as much time as I need to master the content. But in World of Warcraft, but in the classroom rather, my learning time is finite. I have X number, so many hours of seat time or Carnegie units or whatever it is that we call it. And so that amount of time is going to be very limited and finite. And so achievement's always going to be a variable because the time is a constant. So that's a very different situation there. Collaboration is also viewed very differently in these two places. Look at what happens in the classroom. Typically, we have classrooms where still very traditional, no talking. Slackers get a free ride whenever there's group work and things like that. But in World of Warcraft, collaboration is a requirement for success. I can only achieve the highest levels of gameplay by working together with a group of other players, and everybody brings something to the board. when it comes to differentiation, which is a hot topic in education right now, yet we're trying to cram this idea of differentiation into this very strict, regimented sort of curriculum. So typically what happens is, for an average teacher, we shoot for the middle, one size fits all approach. And the high end kids usually get bored and check out. The low end kids struggle and they end up checking out. And we may even lose our middle ground kids. And the learner doesn't have a lot of choice and say in what's going on. But in World of Warcraft, the game really custom tailors itself to my interests and my play style. And I obviously can't get a free ride, because if I do that, if I go into a group and into a multiplayer experience, a group or a raid, and I'm not pulling my weight as a group player, then the group's going to kick me out. If I'm not healing, if I'm not tanking properly, if I'm not doing enough damage, they're going to kick me out. So there's a lot of differences there between the typical classroom and World of Warcraft. Now, when it comes to the idea of assessment, this is a huge difference. In the classroom, students fear assessment. They hate it. It's periodic, either that or we don't even know when it's going to happen, like a pop quiz or something like that. And it really has a limited scope on what it measures when it comes to my understanding. But in World of Warcraft, I crave assessment. That's all the game is. It's constant assessment. And it perfectly assesses my learning. If I'm not succeeding at something, if I'm not mastering the content, the game has very instant feedback mechanisms to let me know that. Usually I die, but it's not permanent. And that leads us kind of to the next point, which is the idea of failure. And this is a huge point here. And it was funny because we had a principals meeting in my district today, and I was chatting with one of my middle school principals, and we were talking about in our district we have a 7-point grading scale. And we were talking about how getting a 69 on it as a final grade is like the most epic failure you could have. It would be much better to get a 0, but being so close and failing, and that's the difference between how games treat failure and how the classroom treats failure. Failure in the classroom is often punitive. I could have a student go through a high school biology class and get to the end with a 68 or 67 or something like that, and they fail the class. But what does that tell me when it comes to assessment? If I have a 67, that should mean that I've mastered 67% of the content in that course. I'm very close to winning that class. 33% more, and I'll have won and mastered this class. But what do we do typically in our schools is we either try to remediate them over the summer when they don't really want to pay attention at all, doing the same kinds of things with the same teacher over and over again, which is doomed failure there, or we tell them, I'm sorry, you'll have to come back and take that class over. So if that were a game, that would be like resetting them from level 85 or level 63 or whatever they are back to 0, and we start over. In World of Warcraft, failure is an expectation. If I fail, guess what? I just go back and I do it again, and I try it again to see what happens. And I retry. And in fact, a lot of game designers, like Will Wright, for example, who designed The Sims, found that the players of his games, actually enjoy failure more than they enjoy success. And it's just a difference in the way that games treat failure. When it comes to engagement, the typical classroom is not very engaging for most of our learners because we block their access to the resources that they want. We tell them they can't take their devices that they use all the time outside of school in, and we really channel them into a very singular, single medium type of instruction often, versus World of Warcraft, where I have lots of different ways that I can be engaged. And when it comes to creativity, the typical classroom really doesn't give the student a lot of option or say when it comes to creativity and how I want to explore a particular topic, and how I want to express my understanding and learning of it. But in World of Warcraft, aside from the game, we have all sorts of options. We can go through and create fan art. We can write fan fiction. There's all sorts of ways I can express my understanding of this world that I'm playing and exploring in. So the question arises, which one would you choose? Given the option between a classroom that was designed like World of Warcraft or a classroom that was designed like what we typically think of classroom, the very traditional industrial age model, which would you choose? And it becomes a very easy decision, at least in my mind.
So the bottom line here is this heavy use of media by young people today undoubtedly has significant impact on their lives. And I think we would do well to understand that this new information landscape, this at your fingertips overload, has produced a cognitive surplus. And what I mean by that is that we, as a result, are seeing a lot of junk. We're seeing junk on the internet, junk on Facebook, junk on our kids' rating. So we blame and fear the technology. But is that smart? Is it reasonable? Should we be caught up in this argument over whether it's a good or a bad thing? Should we fear and loathe this shift? Or should we invest all this time and energy into finding ways to block or limit our kids' use of new media? These are some thoughts from a brilliant journalist named Ann Collier, who has been a driving force in helping parents and helping the public and helping the communities understand that this pushback, knee-jerk reaction that's fear-based to all this new technology, specifically to kids in online social enterprises, is really something we need to be very cautious about. Anne is from connectsafely.org. I know No Clue mentioned Anne in her session earlier. But Anne states that, first of all, it's not going away. And it's counterproductive, if not risky, to give ourselves over to fear. Because by its very nature, this shift represents an urgent call for rational thought, not blinding fear. Secondly, all of these new conditions and properties of digital media call for more critical thinking, more instruction in media literacy, a new media literacy that uses and builds on the critical thinking that hopefully we've been teaching our children all along about what they read, what they consume and download. And now media literacy must also apply to what we post and share and produce and upload and how we play together. So thirdly, that fear, it sends us into denial, or lessens communication with our media-embracing kids. It does not help us or them navigate this cognitive surplus. Good or bad, we've just got to stop fearing the shift, and for our kids and our own sake, get busy figuring out, modeling, and teaching our children how to use new media in safe, enriching ways. But we also have to leave room for them to teach us. So what if school was more like a game? What if we actually used World of Warcraft in school? So originally, when Lucas and I put our heads together about what we hoped would be the outcome of this project, we wanted to provide something for the kids that we know were so bored in the classroom, that the mainstream classroom just was not working for them. So we started with the real outliers. We didn't start with your typical mainstream kid who just could use a little more engagement. We started with what we very loosely term at-risk students. Now, I'm going to let Lucas describe the at-risk population that he began with, and then I'll tell you about mine.
Sure, I'd love to. So the students that we worked with at Cape Fear Middle our first year were kids who were recommended by teachers and or the principal for this program, and we really looked for kids who were what we call deemed at risk for either issues like attendance, behavior, things about that, or basically just kids who didn't have this place where they fit in or really have their tribe. You know, these are kids who weren't necessarily involved or plugged into their band or with sports. They just didn't have a place that they could fit in, and so they needed somewhere that they could go, somewhere that they could plug in. And so that's the kind of kids we targeted in our first year.
Now, contradictory to Lucas's population, I only had a few accounts. I only had like 13 accounts the first year. So I knew I couldn't just open it up and have to turn a lot of kids away. I went directly to my school psychologist and to the counselors at school, and I said, I want the kids that don't have a tribe. They want the kids that don't play an instrument, that aren't on a sports team, that don't work on the newspaper, that have nothing to do after school, because we knew that after school was where we were beginning. And they gave me 13 kids. And these kids came to me, and we learned and we played together. And at the end of the year, one of the school psychologists came to me and said, you know, you never came and got those IEPs. Every one of those students was labeled an at-risk learner. They either were labeled with some kind of a learning disability or a social disability or a behavioral issue, and they were all spectrum related. So I call them the A-team, because that group was all Asperger's, autistic, ADHD, and you know what? To me, they were just brilliant kids who wanted to play and were really willing to do the hard work to master a game like World of Warcraft. Cool.
So one of our things was, in addition to looking at bringing World of Warcraft into the classroom, we needed to provide some justification, because often your stakeholders and your decision makers are going to want to see some justification for this. And World of Warcraft is full of literary opportunities. The game is full of quests. In fact, now I'm sure there are probably over 10,000 quests. When I made this slide, this was right as Cataclysm was being released, and they continue to add more content. So what I looked at was just, okay, let's talk about what do we want our kids to do. We want them reading, obviously. So to participate in the game, they've got to be reading. And so we said, okay, look at all these great quests here. This is going to make a good connection. This is going to be a good opportunity for them to read. And so this is the kind of things, these are kinds of things that we've been up to, and we're going to share some of our experiences. So first off, we started as an elective class. We originally started as 7th grade, middle grade, with 7th grade, middle grades learners. We have now moved to 8th grade, mostly because Mr. Lawson, Craig Lawson, moved to the 8th grade at our school. Peggy, talk a little bit about the age level of your students.
So the students in my initial group were 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. The first year, actually, I misspoke. The first year we only had 7th and 8th graders. This is our third year now. We have 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, because we have 6 kids who come back from the high school every day. The high school lets out a half hour early. They come back to the middle school every single day, hang out in the library until the middle school lets out, and then they play with the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
Okay, so when it came to designing this experience, we needed to factor in a couple different things, and we thought, okay, how are we going to set this thing up? So initially what we decided to do, because we started out as this after-school program, we had the students in playing World of Warcraft. We set up some learning quests for them, some things that we had them doing, some writing and some reading, but it was fairly loose in its academic value. It was more about just having the kids come in after school and having some experiences and building some leadership and things like that, things that really weren't all that measurable. And the principal of the school at the time, Miss Edie Skipper, came in after school several times and observed our students, and she said, this is amazing. She saw things that, I, as an outsider, I had not observed these kids pre or post World of Warcraft, but she saw a lot of growth in the kids. We saw improved attendance. We saw students becoming more mature, and so she said, we need to take this to the next level. How do we do that? And so Craig and I spoke. We said, we need to develop a course, a curriculum. So we decided to set out and put together a full course, year-long. And we knew right off the bat we were going to use this to experiment with all sorts of things. So Craig gave up his planning period during the school and to offer this extra class for students who wanted to take it as an elective. We knew we wanted to enrich their language arts that they were already getting, so it was completely an enrichment course. It was completely paperless. We decided we weren't going to use paper because we hated paper. We both are very kind of absent-minded. We lose paper a lot. So we did that. We decided we wanted it to be a blended course. So we developed it entirely in Moodle to start with. And then we knew we wanted to share it with the world, because if anybody else was crazy enough to do this, then we wanted to give them everything that we had done and used. We knew that it would be important to align it to the Common Core standards too, because standard alignment was going to be real important. We're making a big push in our district to move in that direction. So there's a very loose approach to this. English language arts teachers out there, please forgive me for probably butchering the hero's journey concept by Joseph Campbell. But basically, what we had done, or what we did rather, was to take and look at the student as the hero. Peggy, you're going to have to change the slide there. Hold on, I don't seem to have access to that. One moment. So we wanted to look at the student as the hero, and really treating them though they were the hero. We also incorporated a parallel reading assignment. We wanted to incorporate the literature side of this, so we got The Hobbit by Tolkien, and we had the students following Bilbo's progression through his journey in The Hobbit. Peggy's students, interestingly enough, have just finished that up and have now moved on to Beowulf. Ours are still wrapping up The Hobbit. And then, of course, we gave middle schoolers something to talk about that they all love talking about themselves. So journaling is a real important part of what we do, and reflective writing. We have students looking at things, for example, like charting Bilbo's journey as a hero and comparing it to their own journey in World of Warcraft, and writing about the similarities and differences that they have there. We also decided to change up the language of the classroom. So we don't give lessons anymore. We give quests. We don't refer to ourselves as teachers. We're the lore keepers. Really trying to change that role from being the sole source of information to someone who guides the students along this journey. And that's a really exciting thing that's going on, because it's really transformed the classroom. And just reading chat, yes, I think Hunger Games would work very well. The other thing that we wanted to do was move away from this concept of grades, because this concept is just totally irrelevant to what we're doing. It's contradictory to the direction that we're going. So we moved away from this idea of grades and started using experience points instead. And so students would complete quests, and as they complete quests based off of rubrics and even self-assessments and things like that, they would earn a certain number of experience points. And just like in World of Warcraft or other games, these experience points would accrue and they would level up, just like they would in a game, which made perfect sense because we're all moving toward a common goal. All right. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Moodle as a platform is great. I love Moodle. I think it's awesome. But Moodle was not meeting our needs because we were so outside of the box with our thinking about experience points and things like that, that Moodle just was really hard to get it to transform and really kind of follow this gamified approach. So along comes 3D Game Lab from Boise State. And Lisa Dolly, who I know has spoken here already, 3D Game Lab is amazing, and it is an answer to our prayers. It is exactly what we wanted. So I'm sorry, Lisa apparently presents after this, and you need to, you need to stick around for her presentation because she's going to talk a lot more about 3D Game Lab. So please stick around because it is truly amazing. It really is a cool tool. So what 3D Game Lab allows us to do is take our curriculum, break it down into small chunks, just like the quest that we have in World of Warcraft. It allows us to track the experience points and the students as they level up, and they can actually win the class. And so basically what we did was we took all of our learning experiences from the start to the beginning of our curriculum and said, what would be the total number of experience points? And we assume, okay, student gets 90% of this, that we'll call that a win, because that's about an A, right? So they should win. They should get an A. So students can always tell where they are in that progression. The next thing is this idea of switching from the quest to the assignment, and from the assignment to quests, and stop calling them assignments and giving them small chunks. So 3D Game Lab does that very beautifully. One thing that is really interesting, though, and this was very challenging for me as a former high school biology teacher, was moving toward a situation where students had choice, and allowing the students to choose their path through the curriculum. So basically what I did when we were setting up the series of quests, we looked at what would be a prerequisite, and then we said, okay, which quest do they have to complete, and then from there, where can we let them start having choices? And so after a couple of quests, the curriculum really opens up, and students have lots of choices in what they want to pursue in the class. So we'll have some students who are pursuing a series of quests related to poetry. We may have some students who are pursuing a series of quests related to leadership, and some students who are working on machinima. And so if you were to walk into the classroom today, you'd see some students in World of Warcraft, you'd see some students working on their quests in 3D Game Lab, maybe in social media, but they're all on different things, sometimes working together, sometimes working on their own path, but everybody moving toward a common goal. So I'm going to let Peggy take over and talk about some of the work that our students have done.
So curiously enough, there's a handful of, I have 25 students now, and about 6 of them just got up to this quest today. And it was all self-explanatory within Game Lab. They got to the quest, they went out to some links, they started doing their research. And curiously enough, some of the kids in Lucas's school at Cape Fear Middle School had previously completed these quests. So my kids were also going into the guild site and reading what they had to say, and they said, you know, what do we do? They said everything already. They, you know, theirs are really good. They said everything already. And this brought up a whole discussion about, well, what about quoting some of them and saying how you agree, or adding to something they said? And it brought up a whole English language arts lesson. And they came up with some really, really great examples, and they were able to stretch their thinking a little bit more and really think about the days when they first selected their name, when they voted on their name, and how they brainstormed what the name of their guild should stand for. And when they called the guild the Legacy, the student guild, the Legacy Guild, they meant it for on so many different levels. And today they re-explored that. And then when they were in-game playing together, instead of like 3 or 4 of them going off to do their own thing, they were very insistent on doing things together today. So it was almost like a rejuvenating process. You know, it reunited them, it reinvigorated their original concept of the guild, and all for one and one for all. And it was really a great idea. We're going to talk about some student projects other than the writing that goes on, and the reflection and the journaling. And I'm going to let Lucas talk about this one.
Yeah, I would love to. So it's funny, you know, if you can do World of Warcraft in school, you can do anything in school. So I had kind of asked for the moon, and I thought I'd ask for everything in between. So I said, okay, I want our students to be on Twitter. And what we decided to do last year, as some of you who play World of Warcraft may know, our students, or I'm sorry, the game designers rather, were basically changing the world as this idea of the cataclysm was taking place. So all these events began to happen in the world, and we thought, what a great place to explore point of view. So we went out and created some Twitter accounts. We let the students choose non-player characters. So some of them chose the king of the dwarves, some people chose the human king, and some students chose even like smaller unknown characters, like that lady who wanders between Goldshire and Stormwind selling bread, Kira Songshine. And so we said, let's tell this story from their point of view. And so they began to tweet regularly about all the events that were taking place with the cataclysm from that character's point of view. And it was fascinating. They began to eventually respond to each other. in Twitter, and they even had some outside responses to the things that they were posting. So it was really a fascinating event, and the students really got into it, and it was awesome for them to have that experience that people from the outside world were communicating as well. One of the other things that we study in language arts in 8th grade is propaganda. So again, the Cataclysm event provided all kinds of fuel for that. So this is an example of one student's project. We also wanted to teach them some basic graphic editing skills. We were using the GIMP. So we had them using GIMP to do some basic photo editing. And so this student made an ad for earmuffs made out of the luxurious rats from the tram between the dwarven city and the human city, and so to protect the night elf's sensitive ears when all this cataclysmic stuff is going down. So very exciting, fun stuff, and the stuff that the students came up with it was just amazing. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share this one as well. One of the other things that's real important in our language arts that we wanted to reinforce was this idea of doing citations and references and doing some argumentative writing. So what we did was Craig came up with this lesson, and it is a beautiful lesson and a good example of tying the literature into the gameplay. So we had the students choose a character from The Hobbit and suppose that character was a character in World of Warcraft. What class and race would they be? And they had to cite their resources from either online resources like WoW Wiki and or citations from the book itself. So here is an example where they argued that Bilbo would have been a rogue.
So I have to talk a little bit about this creative writing mission. And this is what the quest said. It just said, for this challenge, we'll flex our creative muscles and imagine an alternate world where our hero lost the struggle with his inner villain. And then they went to their section of their journaling called Tavern Talk and write a short story to share with your fellow heroes to explain how it happened. And then we gave them some guiding questions. Well, I don't know what was in the water that day. I don't know where the stars were, how the stars were aligned, or what phase the moon was. But all of a sudden, the kids, even the kids who were reluctant writers, who, kind of wrote sporadically here and there, sometimes dove into things, sometimes didn't. Every single one of these kids wrote a story. I just started printing them out and putting them in their English teacher mailboxes because they were phenomenal. And when I polled them about it and said, all of a sudden you were asked to write, 3 to 5 paragraphs and I'm getting pages. What happened here? And they just said that this was so inspiring for them because they felt a connection to their character. And it was really easy and fun and really sparked their imagination to envision their character a villain. And then they started writing their stories, and over the course of 3 and 4 days, the stories were getting longer and longer, and they were, giving each other feedback on each other's stories. When I hand these things to teachers, I actually did, we're going to get to one in a second that I'm going to share with you, that I actually handed to a teacher, and she said, you didn't write this. But that's a slide or two ahead. Now, the tour. The tour, which is tomorrow morning. Let's see, 9 o'clock Eastern is 6 o'clock SL time. We hope that you'll join us. You can get all the information on the VWBPE website about how to participate. But our kids have been planning for weeks about how to best approach this tour. Because Cape Fear has done this in the past, I took a page out of their book when my kids were finally available to do it. And I spoke to Craig Lawson and I said, how did you get your kids to, how did you approach this task with them? And he gave me some pointers. But I looked at the calendar, and normally my kids couldn't participate because the time of day they'd be pulled out of other classes. But we just happen to have no school tomorrow for students. It's a superintendent's conference day. And 18 of my 25 students are coming into school of their own volition at 8:15 in the morning on their day off to participate in this tour. They've got some fun events planned for the teachers. They've tackled they've tried to foresee what kind of problems a newcomer would have and tackle how they would handle that. Their communication skills are going to be limited since they won't be using voice. So they wanted to make sure that they had everything spelled correctly. Some of them made macros with a little welcoming speech. These kids are so invested in showing you what they know and having the opportunity to do a little bit of that role reversal. They're taking great pride in it. So I hope as many people as possible can participate tomorrow. This is the piece I started to talk about that one of my students wrote in the first year. He was in 7th grade, and he just was a very bright kid, but just really didn't appreciate writing. He wasn't a writer. He was more of a math science kind of kid. And he wrote this story, and I praised him to the high heavens. He got a badge for it. Everything was wonderful. And I printed it out, and I put it in his teacher's mailbox. And she came to me, and she said, "What is this?" And this is a nice teacher. This isn't like a grumpy old Scroogey teacher. She said, "What is this?" And I said, I'll use his tune name, Heliodor wrote this. And she said, "No." And I said, "Yes." She said, "No, he didn't write this. He doesn't write anything that even remotely resembles this level of writing." And I said, "He wrote it with me in the club after school. I watched him. He wasn't getting it from anywhere else. He wrote it." So she actually then turned around, and the next time they had a writing assignment, she said it was free choice. And she looked at him and she said, "Why don't you write about World of Warcraft?" And it was the first time he got an A in her course because he was writing about something for which he felt great passion. And it was just, again, it's our job to educate these teachers. It's our job to break down the barriers of fear and break down the barriers of negativity, to let them embrace this and still feel like they are covering the prescribed curriculum, because teachers are under such pressure right now to do that when you hand them something that's going to engage the kids, if they can't see how it fits into their curriculum, they really just, as badly as they might feel about it, they just hold their hands up and say, I don't have time. I've got to cover this. The ELAs are coming. The regents are coming. The whatever standardized test is right around the corner is coming, and I've got to cover this. So we have to give them that freedom to see how it will actually work for their prescribed curriculum. So let's come full circle now and think about our role as teachers. What does all of this mean to us as educators? I mean, as I just started to allude to, there's general consensus that education is in trouble. It's the skill and drill. It's the No Child Left Behind. It's the diminished recess. It's the elimination of the arts programs. And it's just getting worse. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. And it's leaving many students and many teachers dissatisfied and not having very much fun. But the fact that you are here and that you will go somewhere tomorrow and talk about this and you will revisit it demonstrates that you have a desire to enact change. And what I always tell teachers is the most important change you can make is in your own practice, in your own classroom, with your own students, right away, by reintroducing playfulness and fun into your teaching. And beginning that reintroduction by using games is a no-brainer. And again, I know from my own experience with teachers that for many of you, willingness is not the issue. If someone would just show you how to make this shift, more importantly, how to make this shift and cover that prescribed curriculum. Where's the manual? Where's the example? Show me the lesson plans. Direct me to the resources. Which games will work? How do I get started? These are the kinds of questions that we are trying to answer with the WoW in School project. When Lucas and Craig spent an entire summer designing this curriculum, they immediately did a Creative Commons license on it and said, take it, use it, adapt it, change it, modify it, take it just as it is and use it. You know, that was the top priority for us, that this was available to you so that this would spread. And we have other options for you as well. I mean, you have to consider the fact that not all schools are going to be able to afford. They may not have the budget to go out and buy 25 copies of World of Warcraft and the 2 expansions or 3 expansions that they might want with it, and the $15 a month game cards. You know, so there are other options too. But come and learn with us. Here are some tips. Start by doing your reading. And these are 3 books that I always highly recommend because they're really coming from 3 different perspectives, but they're all saying the same thing. And the book that you start with is Don't Bother Me Mom, I'm Learning by Mark Prensky. And that's the book you can hand to a parent or to an administrator who's uninitiated into the learning that happens in games. That's a book that's going to just lay it out for you in layman's terms. Your eyes aren't going to bleed from footnotes. And it's really a very parent-friendly book. And even for a teacher who's, you know, totally confused when you even breach the idea of would you like to try some gaming in your curriculum? Then we'd move over to James Paul G. What video games have to teach us about learning and literacy, which for quite a while became my Bible, because between my work with Second Life, with my 4,500 students over 5 years that I brought into Second Life, and with my 45 teachers that were trained, I was seeing a lot of things that I didn't know what to call. I was seeing amazing things happen when students functioned as avatar. And it was James Paul G., with some help from Constance Steinkuhler, that explained it to me, that, you know, that connected my dots and dotted my I's and crossed my T's and explained to me, well, the reason that the student who doesn't participate in the classroom is now participating in the virtual environment is just that basic psychosocial moratorium. And it's just that they have an environment where they can take risks and they don't have fear of repercussion. This is the stuff. And James Paul G., his academic strand is actually, his research originally was actually in the field of linguists. And so he connects everything to literacy and language learning. And it's just a wonderful guide for you to really delve deeply in. And also I should mention that Professor G did not write from a research point of view in terms of observing and gathering data. He dove into games and played them. You know, he played them and discovered all of the learning that happens within the games from inside, not from outside. And finally, for those of you who are not familiar with Jay McGonigal's work, she does have a TED Talk. And even as a seasoned gamer, when I saw the title of her TED Talk, I thought to myself, really? Really? And then I watched it and I listened to her. And then I ran out and bought the book. And she basically suggests that we can save the world and all of the ills of the world, poverty, hunger, environmental issues, by playing more video games. And she supports this in a very authentic and rational manner. And I really highly recommend that book. I quote it all the time. I've used excerpts from it in all my presentations. It really is a great resource for you. And I do have permission to show them. I got permission from my kids and from their parents. These are my heroes. And I'm so very proud of them. And we know, Lucas and I both know, that for many schools, the gateway to getting a program like this established is the after-school club, where you can take your risks and you can establish some valid evidence and then bring it into your academic day. Lucas, did you have something you wanted to add about that?
No, but I think we've got to wrap up. So I'll let you close it out if you'd like to.
Okay.
We all know that the decisions are ultimately not ours, nor are they the teachers, but we need to turn to administration. So it's very important that you get your principal on board, or your district people, or whoever holds the purse strings even. In all fairness, I have to say that this was not a difficult task for me, since my principal is a gamer and is also a proud member of Cognitive Dissonance. But that may not be the case for you. Lucas's principal was not a gamer, and yet she had faith in him. Lucas, why don't you address that for a second? Talk about Edie.
I think we've got to wrap up, Peggy. I'm sorry, guys. Peggy can't hear when I'm talking. She can't hear our audio. But all of these resources are on edurealms.com, and I'll link that one more time, and you can just check the presentation resources, and you'll find these books, these slides, and everything. So we're going to try to get it wrapped up here. Thank you so
the
much,
other thing you can do is, consider looking for a funding source. Or you could even try to use some of the free resources available to you. One of the games that would be a very natural blend for this would be Lord of the Rings Online, which is free to play for those of you who couldn't afford subscriptions to World of Warcraft. And we really, from the bottom of our hearts, would like to invite you to join this Guild of Educators Cognitive Dissonance. All the information is in this presentation, which is on SlideShare, both under Lucas's name or my name. And we strongly urge you to come and play with us.
All right, and Tree is out.
Well, considering all the technical difficulties we had, I want to thank my co-presenter Lucas for dealing with my not being able to hear him and
We're out.
advancing slides at the wrong time, but doing the best I could. And thank all of you for being here with us today. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or to get in touch with Lucas. We'd be more than happy to continue the conversation with you then. Get your game on.
Okay, everybody, we're going to bring our next presenters out, and we just have to thank Peggy and Lucas for being such absolute professionals. Okay? we were talking about earlier about, trying again and doing it until you get it right. Oh my God. if they can't show epic win, I don't know who else can. We're going to ask our next two presenters to come down and to set up their slides. So if you guys would just hang out for a little bit, we will get going on 3D Games Labs, which is another presentation you should hear, considering your last two keynotes talked about them. So just give us a few. We'll be right back. Thank you so much.